Houston. Houston, we have a problem. DJ Apollo has landed. I repeat, DJ Apollo has landed at Hitmix 88.9 WEIU.
Welcome to the Tales of Music and Film podcast. I am DJ Apollo, and I just want to say thank you for tuning in to yet another episode. We are on episode number 22. We are hitting a huge milestone. I just cannot believe we're in the 20s already. Just crazy times, man. And in this episode, we will be closing out the Scarefest marathon that I've been doing for the past month of October. This will be the last scary movie I will cover for now. Will there be more in the future? You'll have to stay tuned to find out. And I thought, what a more fitting way to end this by talking about the original Halloween from 1978. Now, to some, that might be a cliche topic, but, I thought, I like to talk about, my spin on the movie and how I think about it. If you are interested on nerd culture, me and my buddy Marshall did cover the entire Halloween franchise in one recording, starting with the 1978 film, going all the way to Halloween Kills, because we were getting prepped for Halloween Ends, and we dedicated an entire podcast episode just talking about Halloween Ends, so you can find all those episodes on the Nerd Culture podcast. Highly recommend you go check that podcast out. Marshall and his other buddies put so much work into that show, and I think it's turning out beautifully. It's an amazing podcast. So, Halloween 1978, one of the classic horror movies of all time, the movie that is guaranteed to be on every fan's scary movie marathon every Halloween. And this was the movie that really started the slasher franchise, as we all know now. It didn't necessarily start it, but it really made that topic extremely famous. Because thanks to this movie, we had films such as Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and Hellraiser, just to name a couple. All those films were all influenced by what this movie accomplished. Just think about it. A small little B movie that had a budget of $325,000. That's all it had. And it goes on to gross $70 million worldwide, becoming one of the biggest scary movie openings of all time. The movie, of course, was directed by the legendary filmmaker John Carpenter, the guy who's made films such as, of course, Halloween, Escape from New York, Big Trouble in Little China, The Thing, They Live, just to name a few. And of course, The Fog. This guy, and of course, Christine. This guy has made countless amazing scary movies, and they are all individually amazing in their own way. And the cast for this movie, pretty stacked cast for the late 70s. You got the legendary Jamie Lee Curtis as the famous Laurie Strode character, who is considered to be one of the greatest female leads of all time. She is, of course, famous for being called the ultimate final girl in a scary franchise. And she's followed by Nancy Kyes as Annie Brackett. And of course, you have the legendary Nick Castle playing the adult Michael Myers. All the shots of him walking the streets of Haddonfield, Illinois was done by yours truly. And of course, the movie was shot in California. And followed by Nick Castle, you have the legendary actor Donald Pleasence, who played Michael Myers' psychiatrist, Samuel Loomis. Loomis is one of the most important characters in the Halloween franchise, and Donald would go on to play Loomis 4 more times after this movie. He returned in Halloween 2 just a couple years later after this, and he would go on to play Loomis 3 more times in Halloween's 4, 5, and 6, and he passed away just a couple of weeks after Halloween 6 finished production. And of course, you got the other amazing actress, Kylie Richards, as Lindsay Wallace. And lastly, you have PJ Soles, who was also in the scary movie Carrie from 1976 as Linda. And that's really your 6 main characters for this franchise. And this cast is breathtaking. They all played their roles so darn well. And I love this cast. And but speaking of the characters, I actually got to meet. So there's one more actor I'd like to announce. And of course, you have Sandy Johnson playing Judith Myers, who gets murdered at the beginning of the movie. And I had the most amazing honor of meeting Sandy Johnson at the 2021 Flashback Horror Convention in Chicago. I actually contacted her on her fan page on Facebook, and I got to message her a couple of times. And I'm telling you right now, if you ever get a chance to meet this woman, take it. She's like the grandmother of scary movies to me. She's such a sweetheart, beautiful human being. I got my picture with her, and she autographed my Halloween poster. And also at that same convention, I had the amazing honor of meeting Nick Castle, who, fun fact, he helped John Carpenter write the story for Escape from New York. Nick Castle was like a grandfather to me when I met him. Amazing human being. I also got my picture with him, and he autographed my poster as well. He signed his autograph on Michael's knife on the poster. Oh, man, that was so darn cool. Dream come true right there to meet those actors. So this movie holds a special place for me, considering that I got to meet those actors. Just an amazing moment for me. And I'm telling you right now, over 40 years later, this movie actually holds up very well. It is creepy. But before we get into the movie, though, I think it's funny, though. Unfortunately, though, there are a lot of things about this movie that didn't age well, particularly with some of the editing and effects they did. There are quite a bit of movie mistakes in this that once you see them, you can't unsee them. For example, at the beginning of the movie, when Michael escapes the penitentiary at the beginning of the movie, there is a scene where he jumps on top of the car so a little backstory for you. The movie opens up with little boy Michael killing his sister. He was 7 years old, I believe, and it's 1963. And he murdered his sister while his parents are out. Then it cuts to years later in 1978, and he's in a penitentiary, and Loomis and a nurse are driving out to the penitentiary to take Michael to escort him to another facility. And when they got to the gates of the facility, they had a power outage. So all the inmates and patients were all wandering around the front yard. Loomis runs out of the vehicle to try to call the security from the front gate. And the nurse is just sitting in the car, right? Then she notices an inmate climb on top of the hood, and it turns out to be Michael. There's a scene where she's sitting next to the door, right, driver's side, and Michael slams his hand down on the glass, and you can clearly see that a wrench was taped to the actor's wrist so that the glass would break on impact. They tried to hide it with the shirt sleeve, but you can still clearly see it a little bit if you really pay attention. And later on in the movie, when we get introduced to Laurie Strode, when she's walking back from after high school was finished with her two friends, Annie and Linda. Sorry, I lost track. Laurie sees Michael standing next to a bush a few meters ahead from where her and Annie are walking, and she looks back and he disappeared. And when Annie walks over to see if anyone's there and there's nobody there, then her and Lori have a conversation in front of that bush. And if you pay attention to that dialogue scene, you can see a whiff of smoke go past the screen. That was John Carpenter smoking a cigarette just a few meters next to the camera. So I thought that was pretty funny. He actually talked about that. If you watch the Halloween commentary track, he talks about how you can see his cigarette smoke going by the camera during that take. So I thought that was pretty funny. And another hilarious accident sequence was when Loomis is trying to find Michael. He discovers a mechanic truck out in the country. And when he's out there, the minute he finds the vehicle, he calls to report it at a phone booth. And the booth is all made out of glass, and you can clearly see the camera crew's reflection behind it. You can see the boom mic operator and the camera guy just standing there, and it's pretty funny. It's like once you see that, you can't unsee it. But that's just to name a couple of movie mistakes that were kept in. But I mean, if they're not that big a deal. It's kind of funny to notice those. And so the basic premise of this movie is that Michael escapes the penitentiary, he steals mechanic overalls and boots, and he steals a mask from a Halloween store, rope, and a couple of knives. And he starts stalking all these babysitter teenage girls around the streets of Haddonfield on Halloween night. And he ends up killing 5 people, 2 of them being Laurie's friends, Annie and Linda, along with Linda's boyfriend as well. And over the course of the movie, you get an idea who these characters are and who Michael is and who the character Loomis is. A good majority of the movie is Michael stalking Laurie from a distance, and he stalks her friends as well. And that's something about the movie that didn't make much sense to me. He's clearly spotted several times throughout the movie. And I'm like, why didn't these girls just call the cops and be like, hey, officer, there is this really tall guy wearing a white William Shatner looking mask. Can you write a report or something? It's like, why didn't any of them call the cops? Like, Laurie saw Michael stalking her 3 times. Like, there's literally a scene in the movie where she's in her classroom and she looks out the window and she sees Michael just staring at her from a distance. I'm like, why didn't she tell the teacher? She's just like, oh, no big deal. That's the 3rd time I've seen him today doing that, but it's normal. It's just like, no, Laurie, call the cops. What are you doing, And fun little fact for you, the famous Halloween Michael Myers mask, that's actually a William Shatner mask. The movie was on such a tight budget that literally one of the crew members went down to a local Halloween store and just bought a couple of masks, and one of them was a Star Trek William Shatner mask. So what they did was they dyed the hair black, and then they just painted the mask white, and I think they made the eye holes just a tiny bit bigger, and then that's all they did. And that is how one of the most famous masks in film history was created. That's all it was. And so over the story, so after Michael gets spotted a couple of times from Laurie, then it's discovered that on Halloween, Laurie's going to be babysitting a couple of kids, and Annie wants to hang out with her boyfriend. So later on in the film, she takes the kid that she's supposed to be babysitting over to where Laurie's babysitting her kid, and Annie was like, "Can you watch this kid for me?" And Laurie's like, "Yeah." And that's something about the movie. That's something else that didn't really age well with me, is that I don't think Laurie's friends were that nice. It's like, when you watch this movie, Annie and Linda are not really nice to Laurie. It's like, especially Annie. Like, she embarrasses Laurie quite a bit over the course of the movie. Like, she goes behind, Laurie happens to mention she kind of has a crush on a student named Ben Tramer. Then Annie, a few hours later, calls her, "Hey, so I told Ben Tramer that you liked him and that you want to ask him to the dance." I'm like, Annie, that's like not a cool thing to do. It's like, why would you do that? That's extremely embarrassing. Why would you do that to your friend? Like, that's not a good thing to do. And then on top of that, you dump your responsibilities on her. Like, hey, I'm supposed to be watching this kid, but I want to hang out with my boyfriend. So, can you watch her for me? It's just like, Annie, you are so irresponsible. It's not even funny. You know, I just did not think she was that good of a friend. And same with like Linda. It's like her and Annie were just like, they weren't good people to me. They seemed extremely inappropriate for their ages. It's like, all right, guys, let's screw up a little bit here, you know? But that's just my 2 cents on that. So now we cut to Halloween night, and here's where things really get real. So Michael's first victim was Annie. So what happens is so after Annie drops off her kid across the street where Lori's babysitting, she goes back to the house, gets her car keys, and she gets in her car, and she doesn't know that Michael is in the back seat, right? So she's getting ready to start it, and then she notices all the glass is covered in, like, they're all covered up with, like, condensation from, like, someone's breath, which is foreshadowing that Michael's in the back seat and she doesn't know it. He comes up from behind, chokes her out, and then he stabs her in the neck, and her head falls on top of the car horn. And then Michael drags her body back into the house and lays it on top of the bed. And it's established earlier on in the movie when Loomis returns to Haddonfield, he has a cemetery guy show him where Judith's grave is, and he discovers that Michael stole his sister Judith's tombstone, and he lays Annie's body on top of the bed and puts the tombstone behind her. Because here's something else that Michael is known for. He looks at his killings like it's art. Whenever he kills one of his victims, he poses them a certain way, and then he observes it like an artist looking at his finished painting. So his next victim was Linda, and a little later on after he killed Annie, Linda and her boyfriend drive up in their van. And they walk into the house, and they do some, quote, love making, if you know what I mean. And then afterwards, her boyfriend goes downstairs to get a couple of beers from the kitchen. And of course, all the lights are turned off, so he can't see anything. And then Michael was hiding in the closet, and her boyfriend hears some noise coming from the closet, and he thinks that it's her little sister trying to pull a trick on him. So he's like, all right, Lindsay, come on out. And then Michael just rushes him through the door and chokes him, lifts him up against the wall. And then Michael takes his giant butcher knife, stabs him, and it literally goes all the way through him to the point where he's dangling from the wall. He literally stuck him to the wall. And then here comes one of my favorite shots in this movie. And that is where Michael just stands there. You see his head tilt left and right, like he's just observing his work that he just did. And then he would proceed to drag this man's body back upstairs and hangs him from upside down from the ceiling. And then right after this, right, we learned that Michael actually has a sense of humor. So Lindsay's waiting for her boyfriend to come back up with the beers, and then the door opens with Michael just standing there with a classic ghost white blanket over him with eye holes cut into it. And then Linda's like, oh, nice, man, real cute, you know, and then she's like, goofing around with him because she thinks that it's her boyfriend. She doesn't know that it's Michael. So after a while of him just staying there in silence, she's just like, whatever, I'm calling Lori. So she picks the phone up. Then Michael just walks up from behind her and literally wraps the phone cord around her neck And then when Lori picks the phone up, she's listening to Linda getting choked out and killed at the other end of the phone. So she thinks that Linda is pulling a trick on her. But she has a gut feeling that something isn't right. So she puts the phone down. The kids are already tucked away in bed. It's late at night. I think we're hitting like 11 p.m. at night by this point. So she walks across the street to see what the heck is going on. She walks up to the second floor, and then she just sees everything that Michael has displayed. She finds Annie's body laying on the bed with the tombstone, and then Lori just starts freaking out, and then a cupboard opens, and she finds Linda's body just laying there too. It's so funny to me. It's like she's walking through a scary house. Just like, what do we have behind door number 1? Annie's body. Okay, door number 2, Linda's corpse. And now she's going to back up a little bit to a closet here. Door number 3, what do we got, Alex? Here is Linda's boyfriend's body dangling from the ceiling. It's just... everywhere she turns, it's just this new scare. I love it. It's so funny to me. And so then she's sitting next to it. She's sitting next in front of a doorway, and then we just see the famous mask come into frame from the darkness. Michael walks up, stabs Lori in the arm, and then Lori goes falling over the stair railing, hits the floor. She injured her ankle, right? And she starts limping, runs out the front door right across the street, and she's just screaming her lungs out, knocking on neighbors' doors and whatnot to open the door and help, and nobody's helping. I'm like, how is nobody helping her? That's something else about this movie that just didn't make any sense to me. It's like, it's almost midnight, right? Everybody's probably in bed. So, like, let this sink in. This is 1978. There are no, like, cell phones. We are far away from that. Way far. This woman is screaming at the toppest octave she can reach. You see lights turn on, but nobody's walking out on the porch and being like, what the heck is going on? Just like, really? Like, whatever. She's banging on the door of the house where she was babysitting, and she manages to wake up the little boy she was babysitting. He walks downstairs, opens the front door. He lets her in, right? She locks the door. She tells both the kids to run upstairs and hide stat. And she notices that the giant window's open, so Michael managed to sneak into the house. So she's like freaking out, right? She's just sitting there trying to figure out what to do. Michael pops up from behind the couch, and then Lori gets her first attack on Michael. She literally stabs him in the face with her knitting tool right in the eye. And like, Michael just pulls it out of his face like it's nothing. That's the one thing I never understood about Michael. It's like, does he not feel pain? He literally took a needle right in the eye, and he just pulls it out like it's nothing. And then a little later on, he picks the butcher knife back up, chases Lori upstairs. She's hiding in a closet, and it's like, this scene is so hilarious. Like, I gotta make sure he doesn't find me. So I'm gonna proceed to be breathing extremely loud and panting. Like, she's just like, Lori, you're making all kinds of noises. He's gonna know where you're hiding. It's just like, be quiet. He starts tearing down the closet doorway. It's like, can you imagine? You're Michael, right? Walks into the room. Where could she be hiding? Can't possibly be the closet where I'm hearing the loudest panic sounds known to man. It's like, oh, wonder where she is. So he starts tearing down the door. Like, Lori's freaking out. She doesn't know what to do. So she grabs one of the metal hangers off the railing and starts bending it, and she stabs him in the face, and she manages to steal the butcher knife. And here is something else that drives me crazy. She injured him 3 different times, right? And she has the knife. And all 3 times, she just chugs it away. I'm like, Laurie, stop throwing the knife away. How about you keep that in case he wakes up again? 3 different times you throw the knife away. And it's just like Laurie, really? 3 times. Okay, and you didn't think about, oh, this is a good weapon. I should probably keep this in the event he wakes up again. But that's just me with my common sense. But then again, it's a horror movie. And so she thinks that, and she managed to stab Michael with the knife. He's down, okay? She thinks that she finally won. And she tells the kids to run out of the house, go running down the street, go to the neighbors, and have them call the police. Because Michael, of course, conveniently cut the phone line so they can't call the police from that house. So the kids come running out of the house, right? And Loomis is walking the street trying to find Michael. He sees the kids screaming. And the reason... So I'm going to backtrack for a minute. The reason Loomis finds out that Michael's on that street somewhere is a few blocks away. He was at the Myers house, which is abandoned now because after Michael murdered his sister in 1963, nobody wanted to buy the house, so it's abandoned. He's sitting there waiting to see if he'll come back. He just happens to turn to his right a little more, and he notices the station wagon that Michael stole back at the beginning of the movie. I'm like, Loomis, you have been standing guard at this house for hours, and you're just now seeing the car. So that's when he realizes, okay, Michael's nearby. So he's walking the street, sees the kids come running out of the house screaming, and Laurie's standing there in the doorway trying to come back to her senses after the trauma she just experienced. And one of my other favorite shots in this is where we see Michael get up like a zombie, like a corpse coming up out of a coffin. It is terrifying. It's terrifying. And he slowly walks up behind Laurie, and I'm just like, I can just imagine. It's like that scene from Scream where Randy's watching this movie at Stu's house. You just hear Randy going, come on, Laurie, he's right. Laurie, turn around. Turn around. You know, it's just like, anytime anyone's watching this movie, I just imagine the viewers like, Laurie, turn around. He's not dead. Turn around, you know, and then Michael starts choking her out. Loomis comes running up the stairs, and he shoots Michael. Laurie falls to the ground, just bawling her eyes out, crying. And then Loomis runs into the room, and he unloads an entire 6-round magazine into Michael. And Michael falls off the balcony on the ground. And then Loomis checks in on Laurie, and here comes one of my favorite line exchanges. So after Loomis finishes shooting Michael with his revolver, Laurie looks up and she just goes, was that the boogeyman? And then Loomis just looks to her and he's like, funny enough, it was. And then Loomis walks out, right? And you think that the beast has been conquered. Everybody's safe now. Loomis looks over the railing. Michael's gone. And that's when the haunting music kicks in. The amazing Halloween theme created by John Carpenter. He did the whole soundtrack for this movie all on his own. That haunting music kicks in. Then the camera starts panning to previous areas we were in the movie, and you just hear Michael's breathing through the mask. And this whole ending sequence is just showing you Michael is the boogeyman. You can't kill the boogeyman. He could be anywhere. He could be anywhere in Haddonfield right now. He could be behind you right now. And that is what's so terrifying to me. Evil never dies. And that ending shot of Loomis just looking out in the distance, knowing that Michael is still out there somewhere, is terrifying. And Laurie's just sitting there bawling her eyes out, knowing that Michael is still out there and he could come after her again. Then it just cuts to black, and that's it. It's just, dude, what a bone-chilling ending. The ending of this movie sends chills down my spine every time I see it. Dude, this movie was so well crafted, and John Carpenter, this was his first big movie. and he knocked it out of the park with this. I'm sure he's extremely grateful for what he accomplished with this movie. And this movie made such a huge impact on pop culture. Every horror movie film lover out there adored this movie with a passion, and it's made a huge staple in slasher films forever. And I think the next thing I'll do is talk about a couple of fun facts for you. So the movie, of course, was shot in California, and there is a couple of movie mistakes in this. There are a few scenes, if you look closely, in streets in the background, you can see palm trees. It's like anytime I watch this, I'm just like, wait a minute, do we have palm trees in Illinois? I don't think we do, you know? And they filmed this during the summer, and I learned they did this cool little thing, right? So whenever there were scenes of the actors talking outside, they would have fans going in the background, and they had bags of leaves, and then the prop team would be on the sidelines throwing leaves, and the fans would blow the leaves into the shot. And anytime a scene was finished, you had to rake up the leaves, put them back in the bags, and then redo it again for another shot. So the reason Jamie Lee Curtis was hired for this movie was a publicity stunt, because her mother was Janet Leigh, and she, of course, was famous for playing the first victim in the famous movie that most movie fans consider to be one of the very first slasher movies ever made, Psycho. And she plays the lady in the famous shower scene that gets murdered. And everybody thought, it'd make a good tagline for, the daughter of Janet Leigh is playing the lead actress in another slasher movie. So I just thought that was so funny to me that the mom and the daughter would both star in, history-making slasher films that were major breakthroughs in filmmaking. I thought that was amazing. And funny enough, these two would go on to star in a Halloween movie together. So after this movie, Halloween has now become one of the biggest franchises of all time. After this movie, just 2 years later, you had Halloween 2, which John Carpenter did not direct. He didn't want there to be any sequels. He wanted this movie to be a one-time thing, but it made so much money that the company wanted a sequel, so he co-wrote the sequel, but he was not the director for it. And Halloween 2 received mostly good feedback. It did, unfortunately. Every movie after this one really dropped the ball on what made this franchise good in the first place. It's like each movie, there was just more kills, more goofy moments, and none of the movies held a candle to what the original topped. And of course, in 83, you had Season of the Witch, and then 88, you had Halloween 4, then you had Halloween's 5 and 6, and then you had Halloween H2O in 1998, and H2O, so what that movie did was it starts a new timeline. So in the Halloween franchise, counting the Rob Zombie remakes, there are 5 Halloween timelines. And in one timeline, you have Halloween's 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. And then another timeline, you have Halloween's 1, 2, H20, and Resurrection. And then you have another timeline where it's just Season of the Witch. That's its own thing. Then you have the brand new timeline that just finished with Halloween 1978, and then Halloween's 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. And then for number 5, you have the 2 Rob Zombie reboot movies. So in one of the timelines, you have Halloween's 1, 2, and H20 and Resurrection. So in H20, it keeps the first 2 movies canon, and in that movie, they bring back Laurie as the main character. Like, Laurie was the main character in the first 2 movies. Then they brought her back in H20 to have a complete, brother and sister trilogy. And this movie is supposed to take place 20 years later after the events of the original movie. And the movie did this cool little thing where Jamie Lee Curtis' mom plays a teacher in the movie, because in the plot in this movie, Laurie is now a college teacher, and her mom played another teacher, and they shared a couple of scenes together, exchanging dialogue. And there is this cool little scene that pays homage to Psycho. There's a scene where her mom gets out of a car to talk with Laurie, and it's the same model car that that Jamie's mom drove in the Psycho movie, with the same license plate too, and she's wearing the outfit she wore in the movie. So I thought that was pretty cool how the director of H20 paid homage to Psycho. So I thought that was pretty awesome. And Halloween did, of course, go right down the drain in the early 2000s when Resurrection came out. It came out in 2002, and it was... Fans consider that to be one of the worst ones in the franchise. Then the Rob Zombie films came out, and they received mixed feelings. I haven't seen them personally. I heard that the first one in 2007 was decent. It was basically just a remake of the original. It didn't really change much. And then I heard that the 2009 sequel was pretty bad. So Halloween needed to be revived in a good way. And that's when the new trilogy showed up. So Halloween H40 came out in 2018. And that movie literally brought the franchise back. That was my favorite one out of the new trilogy. Like, the filmmakers for that one understood what made the original such a classic, and they erased all the movies except for the original. So in that movie and its sequels, only the 78 original is canon. And I thought that was the right call to make, because I think that opened the door for new possibilities to why Michael went after Laurie in the 78 original. Because literally in all the other movies, he goes after her because you find out in Halloween 2, they're brother and sister, and Michael's trying to wipe out his bloodline until he's the last one left. But in this trilogy, it's different, and Halloween 2018 was... To say that movie was hyped is an understatement. I'll never forget how I felt seeing that in the theater. It felt like such an amazing homage to the original, and it was so cool seeing the legendary Jamie Lee Curtis on the big screen again, playing one of her most iconic characters 40 years later. And then we, of course, a couple years later, we had Halloween Kills in 2021, and then we just saw Halloween Ends this year. And if you want to see me talk about those movies, you can find those episodes on the Nerd Culture podcast. So that marks the end for the Halloween 1978 review. I love this movie. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you check it out. It is a horror movie classic, and it holds up extremely well 40 years later. It's a masterpiece scary movie, and it's going to continue to inspire new filmmakers to come. So, amazing movie. So happy that I got to review it. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and till next time, this is DJ Apollo here on the Tales of Music and Film.